Right, welcome back for those who have watched the sessions previously, or hello for those who just joined us to the 12th session of this year's ID24. ID24 is brought to you by the Paciello Group with a kind support from Barclays and the Centre for Inclusive Design. And you can find out more about those organizations on our website. If you like this session, hit that like button and subscribe to the ID24 channel for all future events, streams, and videos. We also like to say a quick hello to organizations that have decided to host their own local ID24 events. And currently, we should have Sapient Razorfish in Germany who are streaming ID24 to 4 of their locations. Don't forget to send in questions for the presenters by tweeting with the hashtag ID24. And at the end of the presentation, we'll pass on the questions to the presenter. And for each session, the best question will also receive a 90-day JAWS license. And note that on YouTube, the chat itself is open, but we're not monitoring it for questions to our presenters. It's purely there for participants to kind of chat amongst themselves and share information. And our next slot is taken over by David Caldwell from one of our sponsors, Barclays. And he's going to talk to us about from accessibility compliance to inclusive design. And without further ado, David, it's over to you.
Great, thank you very much, and thank you for having me at ID24. I really enjoyed watching the event earlier this year, and I'm really excited about being part of this great event this year. Before I start, I know we just mentioned that Barclays are supporting ID24 this year, and we're really proud to do that. And as you'll hear in the next few minutes, Barclays has been on a bit of a journey over the last few years from an accessibility perspective. And as part of that, we've been working hard to support events and communities that really make a difference. This year, we've supported 3 great communities, Access Chat, who you'll be hearing from later on today, 6 p.m. GMT, the London Accessibility Meetups, and now ID24. And community events really matter to us because we feel that they're the best place to share and learn from others. So I thought it was worth setting some context about who we are, as I'm sure there's bound to be people out there who don't really know who Barclays are. At our core, Barclays is a transatlantic consumer, corporate and investment bank. And what that means in layman's terms, in proper English, is that Barclays is one of the very few British banks left that are truly universal. And that means that we serve everybody from children through to pensioners, sole traders through to multinationals, and provide every service under the sun from basic banking accounts through to FX hedging, if you know what that is. And this presents us both with an amazing opportunity, but also an immense challenge from an accessibility perspective. We're also quite an old organisation. We've been around for over 325 years. We've got 40 million customers around the world, and we operate in 40 different countries. We also employ around 80,000 colleagues, with about 25,000 of those working in a technology role. And as you can imagine, from a digital accessibility perspective, that in itself presents a huge challenge. As an organisation, we also have a strong purpose of helping people to achieve their ambitions in the right way. And that's supported by a set of values that we call RISEs, which is respect, integrity, service, excellence, and stewardship. And those values and that purpose are important from an accessibility and inclusive design perspective, as they actually really contribute, both accessibility and inclusive design, to helping us to achieve that purpose. A little bit about me. So like the guy said, I'm David Caldwell. I'm a digital accessibility manager within Barclays, and I work in sort of the group area of the bank, which means that we help to set the standards, the processes, and the approach for accessibility at Barclays. And on top of that, my role is to support the digital and technology function within our organisation to deliver more accessible and inclusive products for all of our customers, our clients, our colleagues, and indeed anyone who has any contact with us at all. So whether you're looking at a new bank account as a new customer, whether you're a current customer, whether you're looking to become you want to become an employee and a colleague of Barclays, or whether you're just interested in one of our citizenship activities. So Digital Eagles, for example, you are impacted by accessibility, and we want to make sure that your experience with us is consistent and as accessible and inclusive as it can be. A bit about me: I joined Barclays back in 2011 after leaving university, and spent about a year and a half working in different roles across the organisation. And I joined the accessibility team in 2013, and the rest, as they say, is history. My main focuses tend to be around training and cultural change around accessibility, which is the main element of this talk, as well as how we monitor and manage accessibility maturity. And I spend a lot of time supporting our product teams as well. So one of the things that we talk about is the fact that accessibility is a destination. Sorry, isn't a destination for us, it's definitely a journey. And I know that sounds particularly cheesy. Oh, I've left an alert on. Particularly cheesy. But it's definitely something that we've been, it's definitely a journey that we've been on for a while. And looking back, this is, I suppose, a bit of a potted history of that journey. Our branches have been historically accessible, and about 98% of them are fully accessible. But as the world has changed and as the banking industry has changed, branches have become much less of a focus for our customers and for the service that we deliver. A recent statistic is that 90% of all transactions at Barclays are done through a screen. About half of those are done on a device that our customers own, and half of those are done on devices that we own. So whether that's a cash machine or a self-service device in our branches. So 90% of the things that we do are digital with our customers. And so for us, having an ambition around accessible technology was really important. So back in 2012, we signed the Accessible Technology Charter, and we started the journey of making more of our technology accessible. So for example, talking ATMs was one of the first things that we did, and I'll talk about that in a little while. But since then, we've been delivering a variety of new and new accessible services, such as high visibility debit cards and signed video. And that goes through to an external commitment that we've made, again, that I'll talk about in a moment. But we're conscious that it never ends, and we're always striving to do more and to level up on our commitment as well as our delivery around accessibility. So a couple of seconds ago, I mentioned that we've set ourselves an ambition. That ambition is to become the most accessible and inclusive company in the FTSE 100. And the quote that I have on screen is from the CEO of Barclays UK, Ashok Vaswani, who incidentally is also the accessibility and disability champion for the bank. And in this quote, Ashok says that we want to do this not only because it makes good commercial sense, but because it's the right thing to do and it aligns with our values and our purpose as an organisation. This ambition goes back to 2013, as I mentioned, but and has changed slightly in its wording since then. But the fundamental element remains the same. We want to be leaders within this agenda, not because the law says we need to, but because we want to, and because we see the commercial benefit of doing so. One thing that I think is really nice and interesting about the approach we have to accessibility is that we're not shy to say that we're doing this because it's got commercial benefit. And I know that many organisations do it for that reason, but they're often afraid to say, look, we do this because it makes commercial sense. But one of the challenges we've had over the years is defining what we mean by accessibility and accessible. Often in IT and technology circles, accessibility is mistaken for resilience or availability or user access management. We've tried to clarify that, and we don't think it's quite right yet, but we've said that at Barclays, accessibility means that ensuring everyone can use our products and our services or be employed by us. And more recently, we've added the "it's that simple" bit, because we've had times where we're asked about, well, this doesn't apply to me, or I need an exception, I need a dispensation, I need a way of not having to deal with this because it's too difficult. But actually for us, that it's that simple basically means no ifs and no buts. So up to now, I've probably presented quite a rosy picture of the world, and a picture that probably suggests that this has been an easy ride. Look, we all know that that's not the case, and we know that the road to accessible products and services and inclusive design is difficult. And it's for that reason that this quote from Cordelia McGee-Tubb, who was the tech lead for web accessibility at Dropbox, she isn't there anymore, but this quote is from that time, really resonates with me and with the work that we've been doing at Barclays. In the quote, she says that to create accessible products, you need to find opportunities to spread accessibility knowledge and enthusiasm in a sustainable way throughout your company. But awareness is one of the biggest barriers to implementing these best practices into a product. We've definitely seen this, and that what we've identified is that in a highly regulated, very delivery-focused organization like ours, it can be difficult to add what can sometimes be seen as more requirements. Now, we know that they're not more requirements, but that's the perception that some people in our organization have had in the past. What we also know is that no matter how much we talk about accessibility, not everyone will hear the message. Not everyone will know what our ambition is. A great example of this is that we conduct research internally on a regular basis to find out what our colleagues know and what they don't know. And in a recent State of the Nation research, which is sort of what we call it, we identified that about 50% of the technology colleagues who answered the survey hadn't heard about the ambition. Clearly, that presents a real challenge, because if they're not aware that we have this ambition, they'll not be aware that they have to do anything. But what we do know from that research is that they want to do the right thing, and that they understand the benefits of delivering accessible products, but that we've got a better job to do to articulate the why and the what, provide training, and ensure that our leaders understand that this is important. That's why over the last couple of years, we've embarked on a culture change program to try and align how our colleagues feel, think, and act around accessibility and inclusive design, to enable us to achieve our ambitions and deliver for all of our customers and our colleagues, and to get us to a better place to enable our colleagues to move from accessibility compliance to inclusive design. So if any of you have ever done culture change work, you'll know that you need three things. You need to realign three things, sorry. You need to realign how people feel, you need to realign how people think, and you need to realign how people act. But in true Barclays style, saying that we're doing stuff to change how people feel, how people think, and how people act wasn't good enough. It didn't have the pizzazz that it needed. So what we did was we came up with an approach that is starting to deliver benefits at Barclays. So the first one is inspiring hearts, which is our feel. So that's the emotional side of the conversation, the things that we need to pull on people's emotional and unrational brains, to demonstrate that accessibility and inclusive design isn't just good for business, it's the right thing to do, and that it has an impact on people's lives. For think, we talk about educating heads, and this is the rational argument, feeding the rational brain, showing the facts of accessibility, the size of the audience and the commercial drivers. And then finally, the act, so enabling hands, so giving people the tools for the job. What we know is that it's not good enough to set people up for success and point them in the right direction, but then not to give them the tools, the training and the support that they need. So enabling hands is the work that we're doing to give them the tools that they need and to make sure that they can deliver in a consistent way. So I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes just going through each of these and giving you an idea of the work that we've done and that we are doing to try and change the culture at Barclays away from a historic box-ticking exercise focused primarily on DDA compliance, for those of you who remember the Disability Discrimination Act in the UK, into a place where we're much more focused on what's the best, most inclusive experience that we can create for our customers. So the first one is inspiring hearts, and inspiring and inspiration is often a dirty word in the disability agenda. But it's really important to help people who maybe are never impacted, who've never been impacted by disability, or who've never thought about accessibility or inclusive design, to connect to the agenda and to what we're asking them to do. And it's the first stage of culture change. By helping colleagues to build empathy and understanding, and helping colleagues to connect to the agenda, we help them to connect to their end users and help them to think about the ways in which the things that they do have an ultimate impact on the people they're trying to serve. One of the biggest challenges we have as an organization is that many designers and developers here is that they never interact with their end user. It's especially the case where, because a significant amount of work is being done overseas. And so colleagues in our development houses in India or in Lithuania, where we don't have retail customers, or we don't, in some cases, have any customers, it can be very difficult for them to connect to their real end users. And what's important in here is that we recognize that for many of those end users, for many of those customers, the physical world presents lots of different challenges, whether it's the time or the ability to get into a branch, the ability to speak with somebody on the phone, or any of the other barriers that are presented to people with and without disabilities. We have a duty to make sure that the digital world that our people are creating doesn't create the same challenges as they face in the physical world. We also believe that it's our job as technologists to create this better, more accessible and inclusive world, rather than for business people to ask and prioritize it. That accessibility and inclusive design as an extension should be core and not an add-on. And by helping our colleagues to understand this, by showing them what's possible and the impact we have on someone's life, when we bake in accessibility and we think about inclusive design, we hope it will inspire them to do more. I talked at the very start about the work that we did with talking cash machines. Back in 2012, none of our cash machines talked, and only about 3% in the UK did. I know that in the US the number is a lot higher, but in the UK the landscape was really poor. And so the RNIB set a challenge to the financial services industry to make money talk. And by enabling about 80% of our cash machines to talk, we showed what was possible. And what that did was unlock stories of real people whose lives had been changed. So for the first time, we were hearing from customers who'd never been able to use an ATM, that they were able to be more independent and to access money independently without the need to ask random strangers on the street for help. We heard of customers who literally turned to the person behind them in the queue for an ATM and asked them to get them £20 out, and here was their card and their PIN number, leaving them open to fraud and to theft. We still talk about talking cash machines as a great example of how we can take a mainstream product, add some very small amounts of a very small feature that then benefits not just people who are vision impaired, but a whole range of different people with and without disabilities. So this slide is very, very busy, and I'm imagining through the streaming that we're doing, it's probably a little bit fuzzy. I'm not going to talk about it in too much detail, but you can get it from the Barclays accessibility portal, which is barclayscorporate.com/accessibility. But what I want to say is that often the response that we get when we talk about inspiring hearts are the knee-jerk reactions that create myths. So it's the arguments that accessibility and inclusive design is too expensive, or that the market is just too small, or that accessibility isn't my job really. That accessibility it'll constrain our designs. And of course, the biggest one of all, nobody's complaining, so we must be getting it right. Now, we all know that that's not the case. We know that these myths aren't true. And so the Mythbusters work that we did, and this infographic and a YouTube animation that you can find by typing accessibility Mythbusters, tries to debunk some of those myths. So we created this infographic. Like I said, it's available on our corporate accessibility portal. that we think covers the top 5, but actually we know there's a whole load more, and we're always looking at how we can improve things like this. So if you have any myths that you've heard of, that either you have already debunked or that you'd like us to do some work to debunk it, then get in touch via Twitter. The Twitter handle will come at the end. What's really nice about this segue into myth busting is that it leads me nicely onto the educating heads work that we've been doing. So remembering back to the feel, think, do, feel, think, act, sorry, and this is the think element of that, and this is the rational argument for accessibility, the cold hard facts. And actually what we've discovered is that there's not a huge amount of data out there really. So what we've done is, when we talk about educating heads and we talk to our colleagues, we focus on 3 main areas: population size, the breadth of people who benefit from accessibility, and the purple pound. We've also got a key action, which I'll talk about in a moment. So population size, in the UK at least, there's a whole load of great data from lots of different charities about the size of their populations. But what we found is that when you take all of those pieces of data and you stick them all together, it basically shows that every single person in the UK has a disability. Now, we know that's not the case. So we've done some work using government data to try and unpick some of that confusion. And what we were able to show was that nearly 19 million, so 18.6 million people in the UK have an impairment, and that of those, 12.8 million people have a disability. And whilst those numbers sound really big, and they are really big, it doesn't always provide a great way to help people to understand what the scale of that is. So what we did was we did some work to try and align that to 2 geographic regions. So, for example, 18.6 million people, the number of people with an impairment in the UK, is equivalent to the combined populations of Austria and Switzerland. And the 12.8 million people, so the number of people with a permanent impairment, is equivalent to the population of London, Manchester, Birmingham, Liverpool, Leeds, Bristol, Cardiff, Sheffield, and Glasgow. Now, when we put it like that, when we put it into the context of the 6 or 7 biggest cities in the UK, there's no way that anybody can argue with that, and there's no way that it's a small number. But that in itself doesn't present the full picture. So the next thing that we talk about is the breadth. So it doesn't just benefit those with permanent impairment, it benefits those with temporary impairments and those with situational impairments. And when you consider those, and when we talk about how our colleagues can when they're developing systems, can consider that breadth, we're basically talking about everybody. And the light bulb moment that happens when you talk to people about the sheer scale of the impact that they can have is incredible, and we love seeing it. So it's almost one of those conversations that leads people down the path of enlightenment when it comes to accessibility and inclusive design, that actually we're not talking about screen reader accessibility, we're not talking about assistive technologies, we're talking about everybody. And so it's no longer a small benefit, it's significant. The purple pound has been bandished around in the UK for the last 5 years or so, and you probably have heard about the kind of the global statistic, which is about $1 trillion globally, and that's the spending power, spending potential of people whose household has somebody with a disability in. In the UK, it's about we call it the purple pound, and the most recent statistic is that it's around £256 billion. That's grown significantly over the last few years, but it's still a market that's being neglected. And again, when we talk about actually the wider impact of accessibility, we can see that actually it's a huge market that everybody benefits from. And so it's even more important that we ensure that people are thinking about accessibility. The last one is a padlock, and it's an action, and I'm not going to talk too much about it because it kind of goes into I could go into a lot of detail about what we've done. Essentially, because we work in such a regulated environment, we'll always have an element of we have to attached to it, and that's because we have controls in place to make sure that we meet legal obligations and regulatory obligations, as well as meeting things that we do because we want to protect ourselves as an organization, or we want to create a great new experience for people in whatever way that is formatted. And what we've done in the last year or so is to try and align ourselves better with more powerful, I suppose, control areas that you would normally think about in a banking sense. So people like security have a control approach that we've now adopted and that we're part of. So we've got we're delivering much more agile products, and that allows us to align ourselves to control areas which have been historically seen as critical, and to present requirements in a way that is now becoming the accepted way of dealing with what we call risk around accessibility. And as much as, like I say, we talk about it being risk and we talk about it being a thing that our colleagues have to do, we're still trying to embed that want to message, because the want to and the have to will always be the same, two sides of the same coin at Barclays. But the want to makes the have to an easier pill to swallow. And then the last section was enabling hands. And I wanted to talk about this because it's really the bit where we move people from the theoretical elements of thinking about accessibility and inclusive design into the practicalities. And we've got 4 elements that we've been working on to move our colleagues from this approach to accessibility that's about box ticking into a much more broad thinking around accessibility and inclusive design. So the 4 areas that we've done a lot of work on in the last year are enterprise tooling, controls, academy, and design patterns and libraries. So many of you will be aware that standalone tools are out there, whether it's the great color contrast analyzer from the Paciello group or the Watt toolbar, and they're great for doing basic checks, but for us, they lack scalability. And because of how they're created and distributed, they're often hard for us to deploy at scale. So we've been working really closely to deploy a suite of enterprise tools that support our delivery teams in creating accessibility in a much more easily achievable and managed and consistent way. To that end, these tools are both tools in our development environment as well as our production environments, and they're the kind of tools that most organizations are using to do automated testing. And that isn't new and unusual in any way, but for us it's a core element of moving from this compliance mindset to a mindset that's much more focused on, right, well, so I've got the basics now, what do I need to do to level up and to move beyond the basic things, because actually we've automated it and we've taken a lot of the pain away. I talked about the lean control approach that we've been adopting on the last slide, but I wanted to talk about it here. WCAG remains the go-to standard for accessibility, and whilst we are starting to see some great principles around inclusive design, which I'll talk about in a second coming through, we still need a way of controlling accessibility and inclusive design from a corporate perspective. And many of you will know that WCAG is a huge checklist that can be very daunting for people who are not used to working with it. And so what we've done over the last year or two is take that large body of standards and checkpoints and condensed it down into a more manageable number. So we've got, so as part of the leaning of accessibility controls, we've gone from 50 control points down to 10 without losing the fundamental elements of accessibility. Now, what that does is it not only makes it more manageable for our product teams to deliver against it, but it's also in the spirit of agile. And so what we've seen is a greater willingness and a greater understanding of why these are important and how they can be delivered against. What we've also started to see, as I mentioned, with the enterprise tooling, is a bigger step towards, right, so if that's what we need to do, to meet the basics, what's the stuff that we need to do to move even further forward? The third piece is the Academy program, which we are really only starting to get a huge momentum behind. But what we've learned and what we know is that we can't expect everybody to understand accessibility. There was a great talk earlier today, whose name I have completely forgotten, where she was talking about sorry, it was Misha, where Misha was talking about how most people only know a little bit about accessibility, and it's important that we help everybody to understand more about accessibility. And we know that we can't just expect people to come with knowledge, because really the education system doesn't equip people with accessibility knowledge, and most developer training programs don't equip people with that knowledge. So the Accessibility Academy is our program to help deliver skills and knowledge that will build both fundamental, generalist and specialist knowledge pockets across the organization. We've also, over the last last year or so, been creating lots more generalist resources, and some of those we've made available externally. There's some more coming in the next couple of weeks, which we'll be sharing via YouTube and social media. And all of the things that we do, we try and make available on Creative Commons licenses, because we know that it's much more powerful if we help the industry move forward than just us moving forward on our own. And the last one is design patterns, and I know there's been some amazing work done by the Paciello Group and by others around design patterns, and even around the patterns to help create design patterns, which is fantastic. And we're really big fans of design patterns, not only because we can create a more consistent approach to our designs, which help from an accessibility perspective, but also that we can help embed accessibility into those design patterns and start to include guidance on how we can use design patterns in a way that supports inclusive design as well. There's an interesting element, actually, and I know that it's something that I've heard other people talk about. Design patterns on their own do not make an accessible site, and so we've got a lot of work to do as part of the Academy to help people to understand that the sticking together lots of accessible components doesn't create, just automatically create an accessible website. But what it does do is free up our colleagues to think more about inclusive design and usability. And because we've been talking to them all the way through the program and through the Academy and through the think and feel elements of the culture change program, we're freeing them up to think about the benefits of accessibility, the impact of how inclusive design could help to enable more of our customers and to unleash their creativity to think about how they can create more innovative products and services which just have accessibility inclusive design built in. And what's really interesting is we're now seeing product teams who are creating mainstream products where when they were started, they never thought about the fact that there could be a great accessibility benefit or an inclusive design benefit. Now coming forward and saying, hang on, we've got this thing, do you think it would work from an accessibility perspective? So whether that's the BPay bands from Barclays Card, which are a wearable contactless payment device, through to the use of voice as a voice automation. So, for example, our mobile banking app now supports Siri payments, and there's some exciting work going on with other innovative products and services, and how we can integrate those from into our products that then have an accessibility benefit as well. So that nicely leads me on to the inclusive design bit of my talk. And now that we've started to free up the organization from thinking that accessibility is hard and that it's all about compliance, we're able to have much better, more interesting conversations about why they need to start thinking about inclusive design. We're really proud to have shamelessly stolen the Paciello Group's inclusive design principles and turned them into this infographic, which again you can either get from the inclusivedesignprinciples.org website or from the Barclays barclayscorporate.com/accessibility site. And what we're starting to see is this being used in training, but also colleagues are looking at how they can use these principles to create better and more inclusive designs. And because these are posters, and back to Misha's earlier presentation, she talked about not hiding stuff away on intranet sites and in file sharing systems. These are posters that we actively encourage people to put up, that they are available for colleagues to put beside their agile Scrum boards or as part of their design packs, so that it's always front of mind. And for our design communities, they feel much more connected to these principles than accessibility standards, because they can more easily see how to implement these principles into their day-to-day work. What's nice is we're also seeing these communities creating their own resources based on what we've provided them. And so they've been adapting these principles into their own language and into their own shared understanding of how they deliver work. We love this because this is about democratizing accessibility and inclusive design, something we see as very important to the future success of accessibility. And when I say that, we acknowledge that there's a shift coming in the accessibility agenda. We're very conscious of the fact that it's no longer just about accessibility professionals sitting and doing audits and passing back a big chunky report, and that accessibility professionals need to be much more hybrid in the way that they deliver their services. So actually at Barclays, our accessibility team is made up of a cross-section of very technical colleagues who are great business focused, have great business focused minds, and those who have not got an accessibility background but have a background in disability and a background in supporting people with disabilities, so that we bring that broad set of experiences together to ensure that what we do is truly accessible and is inclusive of all different backgrounds. I think what we're also really keen to do and keen to see more of is like I say, this democratization of accessibility and inclusive design. And we think that by following this kind of culture change approach, where we give the tools and the power and the support and the knowledge to as many people as possible, we'll get away from this perception that accessibility is done by a team somewhere else, that it's not my job, and that it's not something that I need to worry about, into actually we just do this. This is just the way we work. So are we there yet? Well, actually, the simple answer is no, definitely not. But we're making some great progress. And what I wanted to do was to share with you some of the things that we're committed to doing as an organisation. So we're committed to embedding accessibility and inclusive design into everything that we do, but we're conscious that we have to get the first bit right. And the embedding accessibility work that we're doing is still taking place, and it's still something that we're doing. The organisation is split up into multiple business areas and multiple technology areas, and so even when we think we've got it sussed, things change and new people come through. And so it's important that we continue to have that message of accessibility as well as moving into inclusive design. And on that point, we're committed to bringing the whole organisation along with us on the journey. So it would be very, very easy for us as an organisation to say, well, look, we've got no legal reason to provide accessible products to our corporates or to our investment banking clients. But that goes against the grain for us. And so we want to support the whole organisation. So whether they serve customers on the high street, whether they're corporates, or whether they are our investment banking clients, we want to make sure that the experience we create is accessible, because then that in turn allows them to create more accessible and inclusive working environments. We want to ensure also that our colleagues benefit from the work that we're doing too. So whether that's actually creating better internal systems, and all of the work that we do applies to people, whether they are customers or colleagues or clients or whoever, but also that they get more satisfaction from knowing that they've done a great job. So as part of the work we've been doing to build knowledge, we are also starting to look at how we can recognise great practice and how we can recognise those people who have built their knowledge and expertise around accessibility and inclusive design. And lastly, we're committed to sharing with and learning from this great community. We are very conscious that we are not experts in everything, and that we wouldn't expect us to be either, and that we need to learn from the work that other people have done. And so we love being part of this agenda. We love being part of Access Chat and ID24 because we learn so much. And we want to continue to learn, and we want to continue to share the things that we're doing that we can do because of the size of organisation that we are. And that's it. That's your lot. That's my talk from accessibility compliance to inclusive design. You can get in touch either via @Barclays Access, which is our main Twitter account for accessibility and inclusion, or directly to me at CFUNN. Feel free to drop me an email, david.caldwell@barclays.com. And then those are the two links. Well, one of those links is one that I've mentioned before. And so barclayscorporate.com/accessibility is our best practice portal. And barclays.co.uk/accessibility is where you can find more information about the products, the specific products and services we create from an accessible services perspective. So things like signed video or high visibility debit cards, for example. So that's it.
Excellent. Thank you very much, David. That was amazing. And in time, I know you were having worries about overrunning or not, but that was absolutely spot on. And on a personal note, in my previous life, I've worked in a university setting, working on the web. So it was nice to kind of hear again how the struggle for getting larger organizations, to recognize accessibility and how to actually take it forward in a positive way is still real in other large environments. So that brought back, I'll say, pleasant memories. So we had quite a few questions for you. So you're not getting away lightly. Let's have a look. So I'm going to go in order. So we had two questions from Daniela Valero. So the first one is, after having made your web services more accessible, did you get an increase in your KPI? How was the business impact?
That's a good question. We do track some KPIs. So we know that, as I said, 90% of the business that we do is now through a screen. So a screen we own or a screen that our customers own. And that's been gradually increasing over the last few years. And part of that is going to be from an accessibility perspective. So because we make our services more accessible, we enable people who maybe wouldn't use digital services to use them. So, we get great feedback every day about our mobile banking application, which is been accredited for accessibility. And we know that that's actually the channel of choice for many of our customers. But we know that there's still some stuff we need to do to make some of the experiences much better. So, it's not really an answer to the question, I know, but we are seeing benefits. We are seeing some uptick in KPIs around online, but we haven't got an easy way of connecting those changes to a market for accessibility, because we don't track whether someone's using a screen. Generally, we don't. Well, we have ways of connecting customers who tell us about a disability to their online activity, but we don't do that as a general rule, because that obviously creates some conflicts from a privacy perspective, and obviously maybe our customers don't want us to do that. So it's a long way of answering your question.
No, but you're absolutely right. It's difficult sometimes to attribute, we made this accessible, now prove that made a difference, because there are so many different factors. And, part of it has to be it's the right thing to do, and we just have to do it. So, it's difficult to get the evidence, in numbers and percentages.
I think we probably get the qualitative side more than the quantitative side. So the feedback that we get from our customers and the feedback that we get when something goes wrong is often more powerful than a slight uptick in KPIs.
Yeah, absolutely. And as ever, it's usually like no news is sometimes good news. So if you don't hear people complaining, then hopefully you're doing something right. And the next question, also from Daniela Valero, is how did the accessibility goal raised in? Sorry, I'll rephrase that because I'm just reading it verbatim. How did you raise the accessibility goal within Barclays, and how did you convince the C-level management, I'm guessing, that this is important? Sometimes budget-wise, that can be a challenge.
Yep. So the ambition comes from our C-level. It comes from the CEO of Barclays UK, who sits on the board. It's an ambition that he's incredibly passionate about, and that he talks about at stuff that's not connected to accessibility in any way. So business conferences, he talks about it all the time. That being said, yes, we have an ongoing challenge to translate that C-level, very senior ambition into day to day, which is the work that we've been doing through the academy. So it's quite a broad ambition, and it can be quite a difficult ambition for people to think about how we track that and how we show progress against that. And so the academy is our way of translating that from a broad brushstroke ambition into, well, actually, what does that mean to me? So it's ongoing work. Like I said, the results that we've seen through our research, internal research, suggests that we've still got work to do, because only half of our colleagues know about that ambition. But and that's why it's a journey. It's why we know we'll never really get there in any real sense, any full sense, that the goalposts will keep moving, because that 50% of people who do know might become 20% when they, through headcount changes, or through business realignment, or through business strategy, or whatever. So it's an ongoing conversation that we have to have. A marketing person once told me that if you haven't told them 5 times, you've not told them once. So we are continually saying the same things. As much as it's boring for us sometimes to say the same things, it's really important that we don't become complacent and sort of think, well, everyone knows it now because we've been saying it for 3 years. Most people don't. Most people don't hear it, because the noise, not just in our organization, but the noise out there is so loud around, whether it is the great innovations that are coming through, or whether it's just, busy day-to-day lives.
No, absolutely. And I think the important points that you made throughout as well is that it needs to be something that's embedded inside the organization. Accessibility isn't just we'll get an audit at some point, it'll be done, and then we can just rest on our laurels. So absolutely, just continuous reinforcement and mentioning it. And then we have 2 questions from, and I'm probably going to butcher this person's name. I'm going to try though. Mikolaj Rotniki. And the first question is, how do you monitor real usage of accessibility features offered by your bank? I know you said you're not, in terms of the KPI, you're not explicitly singling out, users with, say, a screen reader. But are there any indicators of, say, this feature can only be accessed through, say, keyboard or screen reader? Is there anything you monitor along those lines?
No, from a digital perspective, we don't, and I think that's it's something that we've thought about. It's something that we have tried to come to terms with, whether it's something we feel comfortable doing, whether actually our customers, what our customers would think, because ultimately we could go and do that and not tell our customers that we're doing it, or we could do it and tell our customers that we're doing it and they might not like it. So we're definitely more focused on, well, actually, what's the feedback that we're seeing through social media, or through our feedback channels, or even through our complaints channels, that's telling us that something's working or something's not. And we're much more focused on that, rather than trying to prove that something that we did is accessible, or that is being used. We get data on things like how many people use Talking Cash machines, or how many people use our signed video service, which is a live BSL interpretation service, or how many cards we've got out there that use the high visibility service, or those sorts of things. And we track those metrics because it doesn't connect directly to a customer. If we were to track usage of how many people used VoiceOver on mobile banking app to do chat, for example, then we'd implicitly be connecting the use of that service to an individual, and that doesn't feel quite right for us.
No, you're absolutely right, and I think that topic has been a perennial kind of hot potato in accessibility discussions. Like, how can we not detect screen reader users, and should we detect screen reader users? Why not make it inclusive and working for everybody? And there's always arguments either way. I think you got 2 more quick questions. Super quick. What's again from Mikolaj Rotniki? Do you use any tools to check accessibility in large scale? I'm assuming something like continuous integration, that sort of thing, and also automated testing.
Yeah, so we that's part of the enterprise tooling bit that I spoke about, that we are productionizing at the moment. It's taken us a little while for various reasons to get that into production ready state. But yeah, so we've got a JavaScript library for continuous integration, and we use a automated testing environment, a couple of automated testing environments for stuff that's sort of in test or production. And then we have sort of crawler tools which do the live environments. Can appreciate I'm not actually allowed to promote the things that we are using, but we're using very well known tools to do that.
Perfect. And thank you for not mentioning our competitors. We don't mind. We don't mind. And then the last question, possibly a bit open-ended, but if you have any idea, are there any qualifications that you would say are recommended to become a tester or auditor? Is there anything that if somebody joined your team, what you'd be looking for?
So you could spend hours talking about this topic. I think it would be a great future topic actually for ID24. I think around how we professionalize this whole sector and this whole industry. There's some great stuff coming out of the International Association of Accessibility Professionals, or IAAP, around certification. There's not, but it's not really tailored. It's not really suitable for people brand new. What we try to do is to teach people when they come into our team, or that what we look for if they don't have an accessibility background is, are they a great developer? Or can we teach them to be a great developer? Because for us, unless you understand what's under the bonnet, unless you understand, if we're looking for somebody in our team to work on web, well, there's no point in you being an accessibility specialist around web if you don't know the web technologies. So being a great developer is, I think, the best starting point. And then actually we're building a training program with a great provider, with a couple of great providers globally that's in-house, but actually takes people from being a great developer to being an accessible and inclusive developer. So there's loads of great resources out there. There's some great stuff from Google on Audacity. There's some good stuff through things that you have to pay for, like Pluralsight, that will give you the starter for 10, that then if I'm really honest, the really detailed stuff, like the proper ARIA and understanding JavaScript accessibility and getting to know screen readers is just stuff that I don't think anybody does really, really well online. And so it's a lot of self-learning, I think, and continuous learning.
No, perfect. And I guess one of the things that I find is just the empathy and the willingness to understand and learn. Often you find developers that are just set in their ways, and for them it will be more difficult to kind of jump into a new mindset of that sort. David, those have been absolutely fantastic answers to the questions and fantastic presentation. So thank you very much for the talk. And as many of our viewers at home know, for each session, we pick the best question tweeted to the hashtag. It's a tough one because we had some really good questions for this round. I would say that for this particular presentation, the 90-day JAWS license will go to Mikolaj Rodnicki, just so I have to say that name one more time and probably butcher it once again. And just a reminder that ID24 is brought to you by the Basilla Group with kind support from Barclays in more ways than one, as we've just seen, and the Center for Inclusive Design. And you can find out more about those organizations on our website. If you like this session, hit that like button and subscribe to the ID24 channel. Yeah, I should have done like a picture-in-picture thing. Yeah, all future events, streams and videos will be posted on ID24. So we'll have a really quick break now, and hopefully you'll join us again for the next session on the hour. But in the meantime, thank you very much, David.
Thanks.
Thank you.